to the Second Renaissance podcast, where we decode the rebirth of human creativity in a technology-driven world. I'm Sorman-Nilsson, global futurist, author, and the co-creator of the Adobe CQ, the IQ test for your creative leadership, and your host for the Second Renaissance. Franziska Iseli, welcome to the Second Renaissance up here on the northern beaches of Sydney.
Thank you so much. It was a very long commute.
I know, you've just come across from the Basic Bananas headquarters at Narrabeen.
Yeah, very fortunate. It's so nice to have other entrepreneurs on the beaches. There's a lot now, especially in Avalon.
I feel like there's like a little mini renaissance here on the Insular Peninsula. Yeah.
It is so true, and it's really nice because I remember when I first started my business 11 years ago, I felt a bit like, oh, do I need to be in the city? And should I have an office, at least in Manly? Or, well, in the city might be more ideal. And then I decided against it just for lifestyle reasons. But it felt a bit lonely almost in this space. And now, I mean, all the cool people are here, right?
We totally are the cool people. I'm curious, what happened at Christmas? Were you like, because you have this like epic, sort of iconic, yellow beaming, Basic Bananas sign and building on the crossroads just north of the bridge that I think divided the northern zone and the southern zone during lockdowns. Which side did you kind of land on?
Well, so my office was in the red zone, north, same as yours. So lockdown, but office was closed anyway. And my house is just close to the office, but it was in the green zone on the other side of the bridge on the beach. So I was in the good zone office, and a few of my team members and friends were in the red zone for that Christmas period. And it was definitely, because all year we haven't traveled. I haven't been on a plane since March last year, which is the first time in years and years that I haven't been on a plane. And so finally, my partner organized a surprise to go to Tasmania for New Year's Eve. And then, of course, and I was so excited just to get on a plane and go somewhere else. And then, of course, we couldn't go.
Well, welcome to where the wildlings live here up in our Avalon studio. I know, this might be a good sort of starting point. I know how much, as a creative, as an entrepreneur, as an innovator, as a social entrepreneur, travel has really sort of shaped you, whether it's getting on your bike and driving through all the stands, through the Middle East, through, parts of Europe. I know you say that some of the most sort of creative or inspirational ideas you get is when you're above the clouds, literally.
Yes.
So now you can't travel. How do you get your inspiration or creativity these days?
It's such a great question. And every year I pick a word, a theme for the year. Do you do that?
Yeah, I do.
Is it public?
I haven't actually picked one for this year, although I think like Renaissance could be, a good year for that particular word.
Like it. Yeah. So mine last year was love. The year before was evolution, and I really got kicked in the butt. Evolution, I think the universe just wanted to give me evolution. That's also when I rode through the stands, and that's where I got definitely kicked in my butt a lot. And then this year, talking creativity and how I get creativity now, I picked the word create. And actually one of my best friends, she made me this bracelet that has create on it. So I wear it. Cool. It's very cute. And so I sat down at the end of last year thinking about the year that has gone without traveling and without adventuring. And I did feel, I know this sounds very like first world problem, but I did feel a bit like, but I really, I need to do things that are a bit crazy adventures. We do local adventures, but it just felt like they're not crazy enough. And so I thought, well, maybe I need to do other things to bring out more creativity and to create again more, maybe instead of staying stagnant. And so I just thought about, okay, to create, this year is my theme. How else can I create? And it involves obviously more music, making more time to create music and write music. I'm not that good at writing music, but doesn't mean that I can't write, just to exercise my creativity. And
what's your instrument of choice?
Well, when I was a kid, I learned, so the instrument that I'm probably the best at is the saxophone. But the one that I play now, the two that I play now that are easier to write music on are the keyboard. I'm not that good. And also the guitar. Again, not very good. I watch YouTube videos and learn songs. And my target is to, I know that might sounds like I'm stifling creativity, but I want to learn one new song on the guitar per month at least. And so that's through music, also through art, like drawing. I bought some courses to do illustrations, to show me some techniques, just creating. And also in terms of entrepreneurship, we just launched another business, the Data People. I'm not sure if you saw it.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I did on your LinkedIn profile. I was
Yeah.
curious to ask you about this. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a, you know, talking creativity, I also feel like oftentimes, this is actually something that one of my girlfriends in Italy, her dad is apparently, I haven't met him, one of these wise old souls. And he gives her tasks all the time. And one task he gave her, which she then told me, is that she needs to do something she doesn't want to do. She doesn't like to do. So
I tell my son, who's 3.5, that all the time.
Really? Well, because he has to do the chores, right? Nice.
But this is her adult father telling her now in adulthood she has to do this.
She's in her late 30s, early 40s. Okay. And so the one thing she did is she went out and got some, I know we're going off track, but it's going to come back to the Data People. She went out and bought some plants, house plants, because she said, I don't like house plants. I can't keep them alive and I just find them annoying. So it's forcing herself to do something she doesn't like. And with this, and I'm not saying that I don't like the Data People. I love the Data People. Otherwise I wouldn't be involved. But it's not necessarily the data is not necessarily my biggest skill, but I'm partnering with 3 guys who are at the top in that industry, and I'm coming in as the marketing and branding director. Yeah, cool. So there's 4 partners, and I feel like I'm learning a lot by just, talking about this topic a lot, because obviously I have to know a lot to market and brand and communicate about it. So yeah, it's part of creating, I guess.
And I think there's so much creative now driven by data. And
Yes.
an example of this is, I know when Netflix launched House of Cards, for example, Netflix back in the day used to be a company that distributed other brands' content, right?
Yes.
And they actually did it via DVDs, and they would send them via snail mail, maybe with a pigeon, to our inboxes, and they would get very little data back on whether someone had actually used that DVD, open it, watch the whole series. And then, of course, they switched their distribution model to one that was digital, and all of a sudden they could eavesdrop on both of us and know what we like to binge watch and all the rest. And they could also, cross identify what their database loved in terms of content, even down to, what kind of protagonists, what kind of actors, what kind of directors. And so when they created House of Cards, they did it in a very data-based approach, where they looked at the database and they said, okay, well, we know we have a huge portion of our clients who love watching, Kevin Spacey, for example. Yeah. That we have David Fincher, who's a director who they love. And if we overlay a 20-year-old UK script that was a success, then we've got the perfect Venn diagram for a successful series. Now we have to go off and create it. But even down to the posters that they created, the artists were actually driven by the A/B split testing of different Pantone colors that they cross-checked to see what the eventual creative would be. So it was like a data-driven approach to creativity.
Absolutely. And I mean, Netflix is one of those companies that is definitely 100% data-driven. And I find it very interesting. Did you actually, real quick, on the creativity of posters, did you hear? I forgot who it was. It was one of the directors, I believe, that created a poster for his show. And then he's not an artist, but then proper artist designers designed also posters. They tested the posters and they didn't tell the production company which one is which one. And the audience picked the one of the non-artist. And so they picked that. And this non-artist said that they would never have picked it if they had not tested it and gotten data on what people like. And I find that, very cool that we can now use data to make better decisions, not just decisions based on who has what skills, but based on what do we like.
And I think maybe in terms of the world sort of in some ways slowing down, to bring this back to both data and creativity, that, maybe now when we can't travel and expose our senses to so many, visceral inputs, be it, the sort of, the senses being overdosed in a souk or in a market, or our taste buds, in Bangalore or Mumbai, being overwhelmed. I think maybe there's more space for us to actually sit back. Like I can be guilty of this myself, where I just like, where I'm thinking about a new presentation or, a strategy development workshop, and I'm like researching, and I'm like, I'm just overloading my senses with great ideas, and then there's time to create, and I'm like, oh, I've only left this much time before I actually have to deliver this thing to create. But maybe as like the world slows down and we can't expose our senses so much, do you think that there's sort of more freedom maybe to sit back and rather than just having inputs, to actually focus on the creative outputs?
Yeah, it's a really great question, especially the freedom question, because it's almost like when we couldn't travel anymore, I almost felt like all my freedom was stolen, for the lack of a better word. And then, when I think about it and you pose this question, what about if we actually got more freedom because now we are not constantly on the go and indulging in these experiences? What if that means freedom? And I'm still, I don't know if yes or no, but it's definitely something that I'm exploring. I'm not very good at just sitting back and exploring the nothing, because you asked before, those trips that I've been on, they bring out so much in my thinking, in my imagination too, because they're sometimes quite difficult, and I feel like there are different things that for me personally, and I think it's probably the same for a lot of people, that fuel creativity. For me, one of them is contrasting situations and putting myself into contrasts. So for example, one day on this journey, I might be sleeping in a yurt somewhere in the middle of nowhere in Tajikistan because we didn't make it to a village. The next day we might be staying in a very, rundown motel because that's all we get, and it's interesting, you meet people. And then the next day we might pull into a bigger city and go to the fanciest hotel, 5-star hotel that is very affordable in these countries, and it's living it up in this very fancy way. And it's this contrast, I feel, that makes my brain work differently. It's not just, we live on the northern beaches here, everything is very safe and secure and it's beautiful and we're very privileged, we have beaches. But what about, I'm trying to figure out, how can I get more of this contrast?
Where's the grit?
Exactly. Where's the grit? The northern beaches don't have grit. Narrabeen actually used to have grit. That's why I was attracted to Narrabeen when I moved here first. Narrabeen was very gritty, but now it's very pretty, which is not a bad thing, obviously. But yeah, we don't have grit. But then there are maybe other ways to explore creativity. And one of the other ways, I think, is definitely facing some sort of challenges, whether that is launching a new venture or asking someone for a partnership in business, or doing anything that maybe, again, we don't want to do necessarily, but that maybe will help us to face some challenges.
I guess we've all been, through the, pandemic experience, been nudged or pushed into, or even, pushed off a cliff with our creative ventures. Do you see that with the small businesses or the entrepreneurs that you work with, that people are kind of like, oh, what got us here is not going to get us to where we need to be to actually survive and hopefully thrive beyond the virus?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm seeing sort of two types of businesses. And to be completely honest, before the pandemic, for me personally, as a business owner, in Basic Grounds, I've been running this business for 11 years. I felt a bit meh, I love it, but it was just smooth, everything was running really well. I didn't have super lot of mojo anymore. The pandemic hit, and suddenly I'm like waking up. I'm like, okay, this is exciting. Let's change things. And I woke up a little bit out of this it's all good. I'm just going traveling. The team has this under their control and they're amazing. Now to suddenly like, okay, I'm going to hustle and it's exciting. And so with businesses that we work with, I'm seeing these two types of businesses. The one that did exactly that. They woke up, they're like, okay, this is not going to be, now we have the new normal and the old normal. This is just evolution. Like things they keep evolving, which means that we have to evolve. And they hustled. They took risks. They had the courage to change things, change the offering, change the audiences. And then you have the other type of person that is just waiting. But they're slowly waking up now in 2021. They realized, okay, New Year, a lot of people were waiting for the end of 2020 and then hit 1st of January. They're like, okay, now let's see, are things back to normal? Oh, no, they're not. Okay, how about...
What do you think they're waiting for?
Well, like in a sarcastic way, I think if I want to be sarcastic about the whole thing, I'm like, they were waiting for things to change. But really, to be honest, talking to these people that did wait for the end of the year, it was more about closing one chapter and now opening a new. It wasn't really about...
So a little bit of like symbolism, but then
Yes.
at the same time, maybe just hoping nostalgically that...
Yeah, that things are going to work out the same as the year before. So that second type of person is still sort of like putting the head in the sand a bit. In Australia, there's still a bit of support from the government. So they're still living that out, but it's going to run out. So these guys are going to have to pull their head out a little bit sooner than later to adjust. The funny thing is that the ones that have done that last year, they are smashing it. There are so many small businesses that have changed their entire business model, their approach, and they're out there hustling. They are doing so well. And they deserve it too.
Yeah, give us some examples. Like what are they doing? How is it like a different type of content that they're creating? Is it are they innovating on their services, launching totally new products? What are the sort of heartening stories of you just going, hey, that's amazing, that creativity within constraints?
Yeah, there's one. I'll give you two, so that we have two different industries and different products. So one is a mother and daughter team, and they make kids clothing called Bandicoot. Check them out, they're amazing. And they used to rely a lot. They was just them two making their clothing. It's very unique, their stuff, very Aussie, iconic. And they used to rely a lot on markets. They would go to markets and sell their clothing. And then of course all the markets got cancelled. So these two ladies, they hustled, they upskilled to learn how do we sell online. And they don't enjoy it. I mean, they're creatives. They don't want to be on Facebook doing ads and doing all this online stuff, but they are doing it. They are doing it, and they learn how to do it.
Because they just didn't have a choice, right?
Yeah, but their other choice would be to do nothing and not sell anything and get a job instead. But instead, they hustled, they learned how to do it. They learned a skill they didn't really enjoy that much, but that now they're doing so well. They just bought 1 kilometer of fabric, I think they told me, which is a lot if you think about it, to create more of the items. And they hired a team in Queensland to help them create the product. Amazing. So that's one example. And another example is a restaurant in Melbourne. And of course, again, Melbourne got hit a lot harder than we did. So they didn't have any revenue anymore. Restaurant was closed. So they started to offer meal services to go home to people's homes. And they've promoted that. They've changed their whole business model. They've changed the branding on their building, on the restaurant, and people walk past it. They can see the link where it says, go here to get home delivery, etc. And again, they're doing really well, changing that into a completely different business.
Yeah. And how did you guys, as an agency, as an entrepreneurial community, how did you kind of pivot? Did you have to go all online, or what were the things you guys had to do to get through?
Yeah, so for Basic Bananas used to be a lot of offline training. So we used to fly or have mentors flying to different cities around Australia, Switzerland, West Coast US, and New Zealand. So people would fly around from our team and run these mastermind sessions in person.
Sounds like we're talking like centuries ago.
I know.
I know.
It does feel like centuries ago. I know. So, and that just stopped overnight. So all those face-to-face sessions stopped overnight, and we either myself, my co-founder, or mentors would meet these groups of entrepreneurs once a month for half a day to work on their marketing, and then they would also have some online components, and that stopped. And so we put everything online. So we built a studio a little bit like this, where we can deliver the content online virtually, and it was quite a big change for a lot of businesses to get into that mindset to now they don't see us in person anymore. And funnily enough, only very few, we have a community of maybe 400 or 500 people in that program, the Clever Bunch program, and only very few didn't like it. Most of them, the majority, maybe 90% at least, said, you know what, this is saving me travel time to travel to a venue, parking. And for me personally, I feel like the virtual training is very focused. You come in, you work, you don't have the side chatter and the distractions. It's there to get stuff done. And it obviously, definitely our sales went down. We kept our members for, they usually join us for a year and then they renew if they want to. So that was great. But our sales for new businesses to join the community, that went down by at least about 50%. But it's because people had to get used to this new way of engaging with a company. And now sales are back up, and people, I feel like, are getting even better results applying what they're learning than before.
So you're saying that they're learning and deploying what they've just learned.
Yeah, I feel like they're
even
applying
better.
more. Yeah, I feel like they're applying more, and maybe they have to more because it's a situation where we don't know what's tomorrow. And of course, for our business, we now don't have such a big, first of all, carbon footprint flying around all the time, and also less time on planes for all of us. And the costs, of course, have gone down because, I mean, we did also adjust the pricing for the programs to reflect that, but we are a lot leaner now. Before we had lots of expenses on flights, hotels, and venues that we would hire, etc.
Yeah, I wonder, and I always pose this question, whether there were things that you guys had procrastinated on that maybe you knew that one day we'll have to change this, or we can tweak the margins. And
I've always wanted to do more virtual training, and my business partner was a bit more traditional in every sense, and he wanted to keep it the way that it was running. And now, of course, we were forced to be more virtual. And then for the Business Hood is our branding agency, and that's been going nuts because people, I think, had the time last year to work on their brands, and revisit the brand strategy and new websites, new collateral. So they've spent 9 months doing that. So the Business Hood actually has been a little bit under.
And I guess, people are tapping into and have been soul searching, on an individual and company level of going, who do we want to be in the re-emergence? Who do we want to be in what I would term the second renaissance, which is this, great excuse to actually kind of go, who do we want to create? What's the purpose? What's the passion we want to tap into as we reimagine what our business models might look like moving
I think
forward.
that's true. I feel like the first few months of the pandemic, people were sort of binge watching things and getting on all these apps, and then suddenly that got boring. And I feel like a lot of people that I know and a lot of entrepreneurs, they started to think about, okay, is that the future? No, I don't want to be on Netflix all day. I do want to create something meaningful, and that is the renaissance. I think that we're talking about, where it's like almost this rebirth of who am I and what is important. That's why I think also a lot of people maybe changed jobs towards the end of last year. They've realized that who I really am is this, and this is what I want to do. A lot of startups are doing more. I feel like there's more startups that are doing meaningful things. And again, that's part of this renaissance, is people are building stuff not just for the sake of making money, but because they want to do something meaningful. So that whole, which you know really well, that whole model of it's for purpose, but also for profit, which is a really great business model.
And it's interesting because it's easy to imagine that in really, really tough times, no doubt all over the world, it's easy to imagine humanity, scrounging becoming extremely egoic. But I've seen so many examples of the opposite,
I
where
agree.
even the business models that are being born are about sustainability or renewable resources. It's about making a social impact. It's big hedge funds moving very actively or removing board members in companies that
Yeah.
they have a stake in because they're not compatible with the future or sustainability. And so you're seeing a very, very proactive movement towards new models, even this week Elon Musk announced that Tesla had bought $1.5 billion
Yeah.
worth
Bitcoin.
of Bitcoin, right? So or Dogecoin, I think, even more specifically. So you got one of the largest companies in the world, a listed organization, going, hey, we back this new innovation that's been so controversial. And there's probably an argument that none of this would have happened but for the sort of global version of your Italian friend's father going, you need to do something that you don't like.
Yeah.
You need to test something that you feel uncomfortable with.
And maybe we've just become more aware also of our surroundings, whereas maybe before we were a little bit living in our own little silos, doing our thing, having regular salary if you're employed, or doing your thing in your business, but without really caring too much. And then suddenly this epidemic happens, that we suddenly realize, oh, we are not alone, clearly, because as soon as we are connected, we're really connected, because obviously something like this can spread only through this connectedness. And I definitely have seen so many, we talked earlier before the interview about moments of humanity. I've seen so many moments of humanity, more than before even. And I think that's really cool. And seeing these companies, and again, I think there are the companies that are taking the risks and that are getting it, and are doing more work in that space of sustainability or whatever, embracing a cause. And then there are the ones that are still in the old ages, and they still force their team to go back into the office 9 to 5. I know these people, entrepreneurs too, they don't believe in this flexible model. I was working with a law firm actually last week. I was doing a session on new school marketing with 35 lawyers in a law firm. And the founder, very lovely guy, he said, just please don't tell them anything about this new AG working from home flexibility thing. Just, focus on marketing only, because he knows my take on this new AG stuff. I'm all for it, because he wants people to be there. He said, I want people to be here in the office 9 to 5. And that's fair enough. But so you have the ones that are resisting this new renaissance of how we work, live, and engage. And then you have the companies that are embracing.
So you mentioned the world of law, which is, a world that I trained in. And I remember I finished school in Canberra, and I'd really sort of really put my mind towards learning and academics, and my wife will tell me, she says, and as you learn how to hack the way of excelling at school. And so I ended up getting a scholarship, and that was a sort of a blessing and a curse, because the scholarship, as an international student, was worth. I mean, sadly I didn't get this as a check, but it was worth the equivalent of 120 grand, which as a 18-year-old, you're like, oh my god, that's amazing. It paid for the studies, and I got to choose any subject that I wanted to study. And so I was like, what's the most expensive degree? I had ANU, the Australian National University. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll do law because that's expensive, and I'll get a job at some stage. And then, but what I really enjoy is the arts. So I'll do an arts law degree, double degree. But like, it actually kind of went against my inner nature, I think. And the law is all based on, here in Australia, precedent, which is you kind of study what worked in the past. and even laws now are struggling to keep up with ethical concerns in terms of the exponentiality of of technology, etc., privacy, etc., etc. So um, I'm always mesmerized at how family, our childhood, what are the moments in life that give this the likes of yourself the confidence to kind of go, actually I'm just going to follow my intuitions, my purpose, my passions, as opposed to maybe the sort of parental advice like from my parents, like law or banking or doctor. Now at some stage I backed myself to be a futurist.
Yeah, because you've proven to yourself that you can do anything, right?
Yeah, and it's a bit of an evolution, I think, and I think part of it's like also like actually tapping into your sort of child like abilities and going, what are the things through life that I've loved doing. I'm curious, as a Swiss Aussie now, what are the big sort of lifeline moments for you that where you've gone paradigm shift, I learned to trust my own.
Yeah. It's such a great question. And I actually ended up in Australia on a similar path. I got a scholarship to come to Sydney University just for 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
And then after the year was finished, I wanted to stay, but then I would have had to pay the international student fees, which I didn't have. So I went back to Switzerland for a year and then moved back here. But sort of, similar maybe to your upbringing, Swiss people are quite conventional, and definitely in my family actually I have an older brother, and in my family my mom and dad, we were the first ones to go to, like, high school is sort of, it's a bit different to here, high school, it's gymnasium. We were the first one to go to gymnasium, and then we were also the first ones in the entire family to go to university, because in Switzerland it's on a merit system, it's not about how much money you have. And so it was definitely, to make our parents, I guess, a bit proud. And also I did want to study, but my brother studied economy. He's very the quintessential Swiss guy, and he's also the good child in the family, following that advice, to study economy and get a job in a Swiss bank, which he did. And he's an amazing guy. He's 2 years older. I love him to bits. And then for me, I was also a little bit more of the wild child in the family, and I wanted to study more like linguistics and things, but that wouldn't have been good enough. So I did a little bit of a compromise, and I moved to Geneva from Bern. And Geneva is a little bit of a wild city. It's French and it's international. So compromise, I moved to Geneva and I studied international politics, political science, and marketing. And my dad was very proud that I did political science, even though I did, and I had law and I hated it. And but pivotal moments were definitely growing up as a Swiss girl. It's very, working hard, studying hard, working hard, and getting good marks that's what you do. And we even, this is great parenting, probably not. My brother and I only got rewarded in cash for only if we had the top mark. The top mark is a 6 in Switzerland. So if we had a 6 or a 5.5 at the end of the year, we would get $6 or $5.50. So it was a reward system based on how good you are. And then, so I was in that system and it was all good. I had a lot of top marks, probably because of it a little bit too. And then when I was 16, I did an exchange year in Costa Rica. And that was one of the biggest pivotal moments of my life, because before I'm living in this, great environment and it's safe and it's, Swiss. And then I go to Costa Rica where it's chaos. It's wild. People are crazy in a good way. And I turned suddenly a little bit more into, I don't need to do this conventional study stuff, I just be a bit more free and flexible and a bit more wild. It was definitely more my energy. And then I met all these Aussie exchange students in Costa Rica. They were 2 years older than me. They were nuts. Like, for a Swiss girl, I looked at these 2 year older, they were 18 and they were nuts. They were partying all the time. And I'm like, wow, I like these people. And actually back then, at 16, apparently I said to my Australian friend, who is still my friend now, she lives in Canada, I said to her that one day I will be an Aussie, because I just like their vibe. And so then that was a pivotal moment. I came back to Switzerland to go to university. And my dad always regretted a little bit that Costa Rica year because he could see my shift, how I wasn't so focused on school anymore. I was more focused on having side jobs after school so I can make money to go travel again. For me personally, it was one of the best things I've ever done. I've grown up a lot in that year because also it was, not easy. I didn't speak the language. Best thing I've ever done. And that was a pivotal moment. And then coming to Australia was definitely a pivotal moment again.
But I'm just curious there. So from a parental perspective, is it that you've shifted or changed, or is it maybe almost like a renaissance, like a rebirth of something who you actually
totally a renaissance.
Always were?
Yeah, you're so right. Totally renaissance. I think I've always been a bit the wild child, but I've conformed more just to keep people happy and to make my dad proud and to get money.
Have you seen the movie? I used to live in. I did part of my law degree in Vienna, Austria, and one of the only really internationally famous movies from or set in Vienna is The Third Man.
I haven't seen it.
Okay, so so there's a scene in the movie where Switzerland gets compared with Italy, and this goes to the point on creativity, which is in this scene, and I paraphrase here, that friction and fighting and chaos, and they use Italy as an example. So, there's always been infighting by all the feudal, principalities, infighting between Genoa and Venice and Florence and all these, all these principalities through centuries, wars, etc. And they say, what has this brought us? This has brought us, Da Vinci, Michelangelo, and the Renaissance.
Yes.
But when you have peace and quiet, and they turn to Switzerland, when you have peace and quiet and hundreds of years of peace, look at Switzerland. The only innovation to come out of Switzerland is the cuckoo clock.
No, the cuckoo clock is Austrian, I think. But what about watches? What is this? A Swiss watch? I'm pointing at your watch.
And I don't think the movie is quite fair because,
No,
of course,
totally not fair.
you have so many artisans who've created amazing, Swiss watches over the centuries. So I don't think the movie is quite accurate. But it's an interesting sentiment of like friction, chaos, your Costa Rican experience.
Oh, totally. And you know what? The sentiment is right. And I think the cuckoo clock is Austrian. I don't think it's...
So they didn't even get the geography right.
No, I don't think we can claim it for a Swiss. It's either Austrian or German. But Switzerland is, you're right, Italy has all this art and creativity and beauty. Switzerland has precision. We have the Swiss watches and the Swiss army knives, and a lot of inventions come out of Switzerland, but it's more like, it's not super the creative, wild creativity. It's like precision engineering, like that type of thinking, which is a little bit different. And you're so right about the whole thing. And, I'm always also intrigued in terms of how we enable kids to be creative, obviously. And I'm going to ask you a question, even though this is your interview, because creativity for me, and I'm sure you tend to agree, it's about tapping into your imagination. And I feel like maybe in certain cultures or families, subcultures, we either allow this creativity to emerge, that kids are, because you look at some kids, they're so inventive, they do their thing and then often turn into entrepreneurs. And then we have other cultures where that's not so enabled. What do you do with your son too?
Yeah, so I guess we've thought about this because I think both Nicole and I. Nicole is an entrepreneur and a fashion designer and a real aesthete. But we probably both sort of conformed a little bit after school on great parental guidance. She really wanted to go off and study design at Central St. Martin's in London. But then her parents were like, no, you should go to, University of Technology Sydney or UTS to study, some real degrees first. And I went off and did my arts law. And I think we both feel like, those like I would say that she probably found her time at UTS like an actual waste of time. No offense to UTS and the business school there that is a client of ours, but the law degree, might have opened a couple of doors and looked good on the CV, but I'm not sure it served me that much. So we're with our parenting now with Lucian, we really want him to have an experience through Montessori education that is, really enabling him to tap into his unique gifts. And I think he's, as a 3.5-year-old, he's still, he's exploring those. But we're already noticing, parts of his personality where we go, whoa, like he's a hugely like empathetic child. Like if I hurt myself, or if I'm trying to do some handyman things around the home and I hit my thumb or some,
I can't imagine you doing handy. Sorry, this is
yeah,
really
I know.
Comment.
But like I actually do so we have we have a summer house at Mackerel Beach, and I've had to learn.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
it's actually doing something you don't maybe want to do, but then you do it and you.
I actually really enjoy it. I think, but again, it's one of those examples where my grandfather Holger in Sweden on my father's side was really good, like engineer, but really enjoyed woodwork, etc. And one summer he looked after us a lot when mum and dad were away, and I learned to build doors. I learned to build benches and soccer goals, because I was really into soccer when I was a kid. I still am. And then I remember my grandfather's partner at the time telling my parents, they're like, "Oh, Anders is really good with a hammer and a saw," and I don't think my parents wanted to hear that. They wanted me to nurture my academic side, so it was never really encouraged. And so I think there's been this latent interest in me for 20 years that really just with owning our summer house and now our mainland house. I've had to, kind of rediscover it, but it's been there as a real interest. I'm not saying I'm ever going to be really great at it, but actually I do enjoy it.
And this gets us back to that point, and I feel like this is an important one to share or almost revisit. Is maybe we've been, and listeners and you and I, we've been on certain paths because we have been maybe sandwiched into a little bit of a, you should study economy, or you should economy or law or political science, but then eventually, even within this, you can have this renaissance of who you are, and even though maybe your degree and your wife's degree, you don't really feel like it's done too much. For my degree, I mean, I'm not doing anything in politics, definitely not in Australia, but I still feel like those 4 years or so have also taught me a lot, whether, not always in the classroom, but interacting with people and writing papers and researching and all the skills, not so much on the specific topic, but just skills. And then how do we apply this when we have a rebirth into what we really want to do?
Yeah. And sometimes might be, again, that parental advice of like, do something you don't want to do, and being like nudged into something can sometimes maybe be a positive. It could also be a negative, where someone spends, an entire career working on something they're not really that good at or passionate about or purposeful about. So I think, when I see my son, when I hit my thumb and he can cry because he sees that I'm in physical pain, he's empathizing with me. I'm like, wow, that empathy that I'm seeing in him is pretty profound. And I'm like curious how, I don't want him to ever lose it because I go, now you should become, an investment banker.
No. And quickly, can I share something on that point? Because this is your topic, how we talk about, obviously, also the future of jobs, and we need to think about for our kids, what skills do they need? Empathy is one of these skills that probably computers, robots won't have for a while. So people like your son that have these other skills are probably a little bit at an advantage. But this is maybe something we can also nurtured, right?
Yeah, I hope so. And I mean, I think it's largely down to educational choices by parents and how we try and influence schools, government, because there's such a huge focus on, sciences, technology, engineering, maths. It's teach your kids how to code so they can, work with robots. And I think that intuition is incorrect.
Yeah.
I would argue that we've had a huge circuit breaker year when people have been able to tap back into their why, which I know is a huge part of what you do. Some people call it their ikigai, like the Japanese
Yes.
from Okinawa.
Yeah.
And then it's like, if there is an opportunity now, if there's a huge shakeup, if there's social mobility, I think it's such a unique moment in history for people to do something that has meaning for themselves, but also meaning for the planet.
Yeah, I agree.
So I'm curious to get back to your journey of creativity. When did you realize that, hey, university, Australia, academia, traditional work, when did you realize that you wanted to do something more or create your own footprint on the universe, so to speak?
Yeah, great question. I've always struggled a little bit with authority. So, I was good at being a teacher's pet, but I struggled with having people telling me what to do, which is obviously when you're in a job, people often tell you what to do. So I always knew, even when I was at university, I always knew I'm going to do my own thing eventually. I didn't know what that was going to be. I just knew, you know what, I will not survive in a job. I just don't like people telling me what to do. And then after I finished my degree, I moved to Australia and I got a job in advertising. And it was actually, I just sort of fell into it because I was here and I thought, you know what, while I figure out my life and what I want to do, I'm just going to do some temp work because I always need to earn some cash. And I was doing a temp job. I was 23, I think, 22 or 23 in an advertising agency at reception, picking up the phone, hardly understood what they were saying in Australian English. But the CEO really liked me. He thought I'm great and my work is great. He offered me a job in accounts management. So I took it because it was a good salary and the job was great dish and I could do a bit of strategy. And so I was working there in a job with a boss and it was the first time in my life that I felt that something was a bit off. And I was too young, I think, to understand this whole concept of why and purpose and all that. I just felt a bit meh. And I'm normally like very happy and, do my thing. And something was off. And I thought maybe it's because I just moved to Australia or I just got engaged or it could have been any of these factors. And only later did I realize it's because I was doing this again. I was pressed into a, a job, and often, and again, this is probably a bit of an entrepreneurial thing. Like often we would do work, and I felt like this is so inefficient. Can we do it this way? But because I was such a junior, it's like no. But what have you got to say? Like we've been doing this for 20 years this way. So no, we're not going to change this process just because you come along and you think we can do it differently. And that really, I thought, well, I can do this better. And then so I did advertising for a few years. And then suddenly I'm like, okay, it's time for me to do my own thing. But the natural answer was to do something in that space of marketing. And that's when then I started Basic Bananas and I never looked back. I knew as soon as I started my own business, and it was hard for 8 months of working really hard, not making a lot of money. But I knew straight away, I knew that the worst that can happen is I go get a job again. It wouldn't have been that hard to get a job. But I knew I can never do that. I can never have a job again with someone telling me what to do. Impossible. And then that's when I sort of really fell in love with entrepreneurship and when I was
What do you love about entrepreneurship? The concept and the journey.
Yeah, I had lunch today with a good friend of mine and she said, I finally found my calling. She said, I love education. I love educating people. She also works in an entrepreneurial space. She works for someone as an educator, but also has to do a lot of the team management. She said, all I want to do is be the educator and provide programs. And I said, it's amazing to know that that's what you want. I actually personally, what I love about entrepreneurship is the creativity, and my entire job I feel is to make things better and to bring also the best out in team members, to let them be creative. And I almost feel like that's something that we can do with our team, with our kids, is let them be creative. What that means is let them fail. Don't tell them what to do always, but let them fail. Some of our best innovations or ideas have come from team, because there's this culture of it's okay, I can make mistakes, and if I every now and then have a really great idea, it's definitely very feels good. And that's the thing that gets me most excited about this space, is being creative, looking for ways to be different to what other people are doing, and also almost sometimes proving people wrong a little bit when they say no, you can't do that, or you won't be able to do that, then to just go and do it.
So we met through EO, which is a global community of entrepreneurs. How important has that community or that culture of being surrounded by other entrepreneurs, how's that shaped you as a person?
EO, I've been in EO for 5 years, and in the beginning I joined because of two reasons. One, I wanted to be surrounded by people that are in a similar space, entrepreneurial space, and have similar challenges. And two, in all honesty, when I first joined EO, it was all middle-aged white guys that I would never hang out with, that think very differently to how I
People
think.
that look like me.
A bit older. A bit older.
Okay.
So 50s, have been in business for a while, quite a lot of conventional business. I mean, you are not the typical EO or futurist.
Okay.
Come on.
Yeah,
People don't know what you do,
yeah,
probably a lot of them.
probably.
So there was a lot of conventional businesses and a lot of people that I thought I would normally not spend time with you because we wouldn't clash in the normal world. And again, it's this contrast. It's like now I'm forced with Forum to hang out with people that think very differently, and it's great for me to go, wow, that's how some people think. So it's been good for that, for being thrown into a great community of people that I feel like we're probably very different in how we think and live and are, but also very same, because we all run businesses, we have the same problems, and it's a place to share deeply and get support. I've met some of the most amazing people globally through EO. And you've probably noticed that everywhere you travel, when you travel, again in 5 years, everywhere you go, there are people to connect with because of this organization. That's been amazing.
Because I think that, drives home the point that there's got to be, subcultures and culturally, the sense of support and the sense of, Australian gung ho, you can have a go is something I really appreciate.
Yes.
as a Swede, and we interviewed a French Australian entrepreneur on the Second Renaissance last weekend, Elise Pioche Balzac, who has an amazing homeware brand here in Australia. And she said, in France, the cultural response to if you want to have a crack is mais non.
Yeah.
Whereas in Australia, it's mais oui.
Yeah.
And, I think that's so heartening in certain cultures around the world. I mean, I think America would be another one, Canada probably another
Definitely.
one, where you can have a go. And I'm curious, just like, I mean, as a Swedish Australian and a Swiss Australian, we probably get very confusing now for our audiences from a geography perspective. But basically, Franziska is from the country of Roger Federer and great chocolate, and I'm from the world of ABBA and IKEA. So these two worlds obviously shape us as well. I mean, there's probably a lot of stories of creativity that, in terms of rebirth, you tap into from your childhood, but childhood in Switzerland, now, adulthood in Australia. How do those two worldviews kind of shape you as a person now? And how do you see them shaping you in your future years as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the cultures are very different. I feel like similar probably to Sweden. In Switzerland, it's more meno. It's more like if you want to start a business, you need to have all the ducks in a row. That's sort of how you approach it. And then by the time you have your ducks in a row, somebody else has already done what you were going to do. And I've seen this many times over and over. Whereas here, you come here and it's like, just do it. I always said, in all honesty, what I did here at quite a young age, I could not have done in Switzerland. If I had done exactly the same business model here in Switzerland, I would not have been as successful this quickly, because here people are just going for it. They also trust you. Here it's more about, if you deliver results, we're all good. Let's do it. In Switzerland, it's more about, what certificate do you have, which diplomas, etc. It's more about that. It's changing a little bit. So, but then, in terms of how has these two worlds shaped me, I feel like Switzerland has so much to give. And Switzerland for me has been very much about work ethics. When I first moved here and I got this job in advertising, I was flabbergasted. I'm like, are people not working? Like, what? Because I was,
They're off surfing at Narrabeen. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like chatting in the office and or surfing, which I do now too. But I felt like, wow, like it's very easy to get ahead here, because you just all you need to do is just put your head down and work very efficiently. And so I've learned from Switzerland to that work integrity, I guess, and also from, again, this is thanks to my parents. When I was maybe 10 or 11, I got my first job on Saturday mornings in a winery where I was cleaning their fountains and mowing the lawn. And I got that so that I could have pocket money to buy stuff that I wanted. And that taught me a lot too. Like, okay, so if I want something, I need to do something. It's like this, it's this consequence, that I feel like a lot of kids in these days don't understand, that when you do a certain action, there's a consequence, positive or negative. So I feel like that's shaped me a lot, that discipline and work ethics. And then here, just give it a go. I didn't tell my parents at the time when I was in advertising and I left my career to build my business. I didn't tell anyone in Switzerland for probably at least 6 months. And the reason why is because I knew that if I tell them, they're going to fill my head with all the thoughts of why I shouldn't have done that, which already for me as a newbie entrepreneur back then wouldn't have been very helpful. So I didn't tell anyone until the business started to prove itself and work.
Don't ask for permission, but it's easy to apologize afterwards.
Well, it's nothing to apologize even. It's like, this is my choice. And some of them still probably don't know exactly what I do. And it's okay. Also, compared to here, most of my best friends at home, and I'm very connected still with my homies, the people that I went to school with, primary school, they don't have businesses. It's not an issue, obviously. We're always connected. Whereas here, more people are entrepreneurial, I guess, than in Switzerland.
My Swiss cuckoo clock tells me that we're nearly in the end zone. If it runs precisely, which I'm hoping. I'm curious. Just you've descended from this, the Swiss mountains, alpine sort of upbringing. I know you love the oceans here in Australia. Part of your social enterprise is also about protecting those oceans. I'm curious, water, snow, nature. What role do you think that plays, not just for you, but in terms of how nature can inspire creativity for humans more broadly?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's huge. I can't speak too much for other people, but I think most people have that sentiment that when you are in nature, or when you are, you bring up the mountains and the ocean. And for me, the feeling that you get in either or is very similar, because there's this vastness, and also there's this vastness that makes you feel so small. And that, I feel, is like the thing that just helps you to evolve and to think more. I often, when I need to think, or I have a difficult situation to solve, my number one place now is always the ocean. Anytime I have a challenging time, I spend so much more time by the ocean, in the ocean, because it's this vastness that makes me feel humble. Sometimes we also maybe get a little bit like on the high horse, and then I don't know if you surf, but sometimes when I have maybe a big win and I'm like feeling all cocky, and then I go surfing, and then I get completely slammed. I feel like suddenly a total beginner, and I've surfed for a while, and I'm like, oh, thank you, I got it.
Yeah.
Get down. You know?
Yeah, I feel a bit the same when I do ocean swimming. I'm not a skilled surfer yet, but certainly when ocean swimming, you feel like you're just like meditating or going through,
Yeah.
and then something happens that really throws you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love both mountains and ocean. If I had to choose one, I would definitely choose the ocean. But both of them, going out into nature, walking, I think is just almost a place to get back to your presence again. You know how we talked about earlier, we're always like a little bit living in the next moment or what needs to happen next or what happened in the past. And I feel like nature is the one place that has the ability to focus you again. It's like you're right here, right now, and it's probably really healthy for your brain and mental health, physical health, etc. to be outside.
And for all listeners and viewers as well, I mean, Franziska and myself have both made, the peninsula and the northern beaches our home, and I feel like there's almost something kind of spiritual to this area. And one of our guests, Mika Utson-Popov, certainly pointed that out, that this is the place where, the Hawkesbury and the Pittwater meet the ocean. There's a certain energy to it up here where really, the Ku-ring-gai National Park, and the bushland meets this beautiful
It's so true.
sense of, spaciousness. And we welcome anyone up here who wants to explore this beautiful part of the world. And certainly it's something that's helped keep me grounded through the pandemic year. I wouldn't choose another place in the world to really, live through lockdowns.
No, we're very fortunate. We're very fortunate. And I always say this place here where we live, this whole area, I've been to many places and I've lived in different countries, and I've always thought, oh, I can live anywhere. I can live in Hawaii. I can live in different places. And then I come back here and I'm like, this is hands down. And I've been to 90 something countries. This is hands down for me, and probably for you too, the most incredible place to live.
Yeah.
I think we're very fortunate. So yeah, anyone is welcome to come and say hi.
Yeah.
Come to Anders' studio.
Yeah, exactly. Well, welcome to the the other side of the wall, across the wall, back into wildling country up on the peninsula. Thank you so much for visiting the place where the second Renaissance is really taking place. It's been a pleasure hosting you, Franziska.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.